The 157th edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Nate Humphrey hands King Rice the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot. Good. Off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout. But the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. Worthy fired. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Me and Anthony are back to talk about Carolina's big win over Kentucky over the weekend in the CBS Sports Classic and get you ready for NC State tomorrow night as Carolina opens up ACC play against the Wolfpack. With that, buddy, you know, when we previewed the game, we put a lot of importance on the game for Carolina to expect that Kentucky win. It came into the game with a 1-4 record, not the normal Kentucky Carolina sees when these two teams get on the court. But, you know, I really stress that for Carolina, the way that they're built this year, they beat a team like Kentucky. It gives them a lot of confidence heading into the ACC play, and they got that win on Saturday, beating the Wildcats 75-63, outscoring them 41-25 in the second half after trailing by 4 at halftime. And, you know, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't the best Carolina's looked this season, and it wasn't a pretty win, but it's one that Carolina needed to get before they got into ACC play.
Oh, definitely. I think that's one of the things that maybe people got a little confused on in the phrasing of the post that I put out with the recap article. I said it was an important win for Carolina. I did not say it was a big win for Carolina. Don't get me wrong, this Kentucky team is not the Kentucky teams of the past. This is not a very good basketball team, which is, fun to watch, to be really honest with you, to a certain extent, because, we've heard so many things about how Cal Perry's the best coach in the country, all this different stuff, but this is still a very important win for Carolina because if you lose this game, you still really don't know a whole lot about this Carolina team. At that point, you're looking and saying, what's our best win? Stanford? That's probably the only game that you feel really overly confident in on your resume. So this is a win that, again, you started out slow. You had to roll all the way back. This Kentucky team is still extremely talented. That's the thing that a lot of people are not going to realize with this team until some of these guys go on and play in the NBA. They are a very young team. COVID-19 has really, really hurt them from a developmental standpoint for their guys because I think you even mentioned it a little bit in the preview. They're a school that, because of how new their roster is year in and year out, they desperately need the offseason to be able to get familiar with the terminology, to be able to get familiar with each other, and be able to run the offense and defense the way that John Calipari wants it run. You can tell that this year, because they didn't have the same type of preparation, that it's really hurting them. But, for Carolina, they were still facing a talented team. You had a couple of guys that came out and hit some big shots early for Kentucky. And once again, you were down double digits. So to be able to come back yet again and continue to fight back and actually win by double digits is just fantastic. Carolina team is building towards something. And, again, you see a lot of yourself in Kentucky in the backcourt.
Yeah.
You saw guys making mistakes. You saw a lot of guys from Kentucky making mistakes in the backcourt with turnovers. That's just – I think that should show you right there the difference between Carolina and Kentucky was the guys in the front court. You got some veteran guys up there. And then you've also got Day'Ron Sharpe, who, look, he's a freshman, but he plays like he's a junior or senior. He's just been fantastic. So – there's definitely a lot of things that, still concern me about this Carolina basketball team. But at 5-2, that was a really big win for them heading into conference play. And it's one that, again, you're probably not going to hang your hat on it to get better seeding in the NCAA tournament. There'll be some other ones later on in ACC play that you win that you'll probably use for that. But at the same time, it's still a very big confidence booster, if anything, for the start of basketball.
Yeah, I'll apologize. You probably got killed because I put right in my article the first sentence. No, this was a big win, and because I didn't look at the record for Kentucky. I looked at what the game represented. The difference in record between 4-3 and 5-2, in my opinion, is it's a really big difference. Just because the way you feel about your non-conference is because it is shorter. It was your last time before you got an ACC play. So in my opinion, it was a big win, and. So Tar Heel fans disagree with you, or disagree with me, that's fine. But I think the fact that, and here's the reason why I think it was a big win. Because you got down by double digits early. You were on the verge, if you wouldn't have woken up, of getting blown out by a pretty bad basketball team. But you look at that second half, and you did everything that you're built to do right, which was you did to Kentucky what Iowa did to you a few weeks ago, where you fouled out their whole entire front court. I said going into the game, there was no reason why Carolina shouldn't dominate the interior. Now, granted, they got out-rebounded, which was very disappointing, but they took every legitimate big man they had on their team, and they put them on the bench in the second half because they fouled them out. You got big-time shots from Kerwin Walton, who made 3 3-pointers in the game, but 2 in that second half on a 12-1 run that really extended to a 20-6 run, which turned the game. And you learned how you can dominate games the way you're built now. Carolina is not going to dominate games in the backcourt with its perimeter play. They're not built to do it. They're not going to do it. You're built to dominate basketball on the interior, and you did that. Armando Bacot, who you mentioned going into the game, how's he going to respond? He gave you 14 points, 8 rebounds. Garrison Brooks gave you 11.6 rebounds. They combined to go 10 of 15 from the field. They were efficient. They were effective. They were tough to handle. Day'Ron Sharpe, as you mentioned, came off the bench, only 7 points, but 11 rebounds. That was big. And so I think that's what Carolina – I think they learned a lot about themselves in this win. They've learned a lot about themselves in their losses, how they can fight back, how they can play with some of the best teams in the country, and Iowa is one of them. And Texas is going to be a pretty tough team to beat in the Big 12. But they haven't learned a lot about themselves in a win. And they got that when they beat Kentucky because they didn't play great. They only shot 43% from the field. They only shot 25% from 3. Hell, they missed 11 free throws and only shot 62% from the foul line. But you know what else they did? They defended for 40 minutes. They held Kentucky to just 40% shooting, only 23% from the foul line. And so I think that's why this was a big win, because you're finding ways to win. And when you're as young as this team is, that's what you got to do, because they don't know how to win. Garrison Brooks knows how to win. Andrew Platek may know how to win, but Caleb Love doesn't know how to win. R.J. Davis, who missed a lot of that time in the second half, doesn't know how to win. Kerwin Walton doesn't know how to win, but they're learning how to win as the more they're playing. And, I thought a big part of or a big moment in that game was right before halftime. It's 38-32. Kentucky zones Carolina. And which if I was any team playing Carolina, I'd zone us as much as I could, because we frankly can't shoot the basketball that we know of at a consistent rate. Caleb Love had yet to really do anything spectacular yet. Drove, got a big layup to go to halftime down 4. I can't tell you what that if he doesn't make that play, if Carolina wins the game or not. To me, that was a big play for Caleb Love as a freshman. You didn't settle for a contested 3-point shot. You drove the ball, which everyone says you can't drive the zone. Yeah, you can. He did it. Got a lay in, and you got the lead to 4. And the second half, you just wore you wore down Kentucky. And I saw a lot of people on there complaining about how Carolina plays with two bigs in an era where you shouldn't play with two bigs and they need to play smaller. But that's how Carolina – if you want Carolina to win and you want them to win at a high level this rate, they're going to need two bigs on the floor because, frankly, their guys on the perimeter are just too young for you to feel comfortable playing with four guys on the perimeter with just one guy, one big man on the floor. So some other takeaways from this game, you got to talk about Kerwin Walton. And, we've he's kind of been under the radar because he hasn't played a whole lot. He hasn't really done a lot of whole things for you defensively, but he made 3 3-pointers for Carolina in that ball game, as much as two in that second half. And I feel like that's a big step for him because I thought in that second half, him individually and our freshmen as a whole really grew up and sparked that team to a big win.
Yeah, I mean, with Armando Bacot, first of all, that was exactly the performance that you were looking for from him. Following that sensational game against NC Central. This is, where we need to see him step up. We said it. Look, Day'Ron Sharpe is doing everything that he needs to do. We need the same from Armando Bacot if he wants to keep the starting job for the entirety of the season. And so far, since we talked about that on the podcast, he's played 2 fantastic games.
Right.
And right now, I don't think that's going away anytime soon because you're seeing a young guy that's learning what he's supposed to be doing when he's on the floor. I think you really got to hand it to this team just overall, mainly their big guys inside, for being able to stay on the floor for the entirety of the game because that was one of the worst officiated games I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yes.
In terms of the start to that second half. Both teams were in the bonus before the under 12. That's a joke. I understand that there is contact that sometimes you have to call. There is no way in hell that you saw 14 fouls that needed to be called in that stretch. And, honestly, I don't, never going to do this probably any other time on this podcast. I commemorate both teams and both coaches for being able to deal with such nonsense because that was, it's ridiculous. It's the most frustrating thing I've ever seen. To see the freshmen step up was huge because you saw, Puff Johnson stepped up as well and had a big game, but mainly Kerwin Walton. This is a guy that came in. And again, at the time when Carolina landed him, you would have thought that this guy was the number 1 ranked player. This dude had every article in the nation being written about him at one time, and he was barely a top 100 prospect. But you can see why he was so sought after and why it was a big land for the Tar Heels. This guy can shoot the basketball. And, it's awesome to start seeing those shots go in because I'm going to tell you, and it's a great thing to have, this guy does not lack confidence. He came out first game of the year and was shooting the ball from 3. There were a couple of shots that came up really far from the basket, but he's still shooting the ball with a lot of confidence, and now it's starting to take off for him. And that's the thing. You're looking for those perimeter guys that can step up. Right now, you don't really have that, so you're going to have to run with 2 bigs. I don't care what anybody says about, we want to play the more modern style of basketball. Speak for yourself. It's not us that wants to play the more modern style of basketball. I don't give a damn if we got to play the old style of basketball, putting the ball inside. Because at this point, please, feel free to message me, let me know. Who the hell on this team are we seeing that is going to come out and shoot the lights out? Are they hiding? Because I'm not seeing that person. If you're going to run a more modern offensive style for, what basketball is produced at the NBA level and for some of the more successful teams even at the college level like Iowa, you show me the 4 shooters that we're going to put around whichever big man and have success with. I'm not seeing it. You've got a special recruiting class this time around for a reason. It's headlined by 2 bigs that people think could play a really big role in the NBA going forward. There's no way in hell that you're going to lessen the role that those guys have. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't make any sense. So I like the way that Carolina was able to play in this game. And again, I haven't talked about Caleb Love yet, but that shot that you talked about that he did was fantastic. He had another one right before that where he took an extremely tough fadeaway jump shot and just found a way to knock it down. It's moments like that where you're just wondering, if he can, continue to play this the way that he has, his